The unexpected guest. The twin suns of Zelthara Prime cast their golden light across the peaceful mining colonies that dotted the planet's surface like scattered jewels. In the orbital control center high above the main settlement, Commander Vex Thalon sipped his morning brew while watching the routine flow of cargo ships and mining vessels that moved lazily between the asteroid fields and the planet's 3 moons. It was supposed to be another quiet day in what had been 3 years of quiet days since the colony was established. Zelthara Prime had earned its reputation as one of the most peaceful worlds in the Outer Rim territories. The Zeltharian people were known throughout the galaxy for their calm nature and their skill at extracting rare minerals from deep space rocks without disturbing the delicate balance of local ecosystems. They had built their society on principles of harmony and careful progress, never taking more than they needed and always leaving room for others to thrive. Commander Thalon adjusted his pale blue uniform and glanced at the duty roster for the day. 3 mining expeditions were scheduled to return from the outer asteroid belt. 2 research teams were conducting atmospheric studies in the southern continent, and Dr. Kira Munson was continuing her xenobiology research at the remote facility near the polar ice caps. Dr. Munson was the only human on the entire planet, a brilliant scientist who had been granted special permission to study the unique crystalline life forms that grew in Zelthara's frozen regions. The Zeltharians had always maintained friendly relations with most species they encountered, including humans, though contact with Earth's territories had been limited in recent years. Humans were known to be busy with their own expansion projects and rarely ventured this far into the Outer Rim unless they had specific business to conduct. This isolation suited the Zeltharians perfectly, as they preferred their peaceful existence without the complications that often came with more aggressive species. Commander Thalon was reviewing the weekly mineral export reports when his assistant, Lieutenant Morakes, approached his station with an expression of confusion on her elongated features. The Zeltharians were tall and slender, with skin that shifted between pale blue and silver depending on their emotional state, and Lieutenant Kess's skin was currently showing the light silver tint that indicated uncertainty. "Commander," she said softly, "we're receiving some unusual readings from the long-range sensors." Thalon looked up from his reports and noticed that several other technicians were now gathered around their monitoring stations, their skin colors all shifting toward the silver of concern. "What kind of readings?" "Something large is approaching from the outer system," Kess replied, her voice steady despite her obvious worry. "Very large, but it's not sending any identification signals or responding to our standard hails." "Commander." Thalon stood up and walked to the main sensor display, where a 3-dimensional map showed the Zelthara system, with all its planets, moons, and regular traffic patterns. There, moving steadily toward Zelthara Prime from the direction of the outer gas giant, was a contact unlike anything he had ever seen before. The object was massive, easily 10 times larger than the biggest cargo hauler that had ever visited their system, and it was moving with a purpose that suggested advanced propulsion technology. "How long until it reaches our orbital space?" Thalon asked. Lieutenant Kess consulted her instruments. "At current speed, approximately 4 hours, Commander." "Have you tried all standard communication frequencies?" "Yes, sir. We've broadcasted on every channel used by known species in this sector. We've sent greeting messages in 17 different languages, including basic mathematical sequences and peaceful intent signals. There's been no response at all, Commander." Thalon felt his skin begin to shift toward the deeper silver that indicated serious concern. In 3 years of managing orbital traffic around Zelthara Prime, he had never encountered a vessel that refused to identify itself or respond to communications. Even the most secretive merchant ships would at least acknowledge contact requests, if only to avoid being classified as a potential threat. "Alert the Defense Council," he ordered, "and send a priority message to the surface. All department heads need to be informed of this situation immediately." As Lieutenant Kess hurried to carry out his orders, Commander Thalon continued to stare at the sensor display. The approaching object maintained a steady course and speed, showing no signs of deceleration as it drew closer to the planet. Whatever it was and whoever was controlling it, they seemed to know exactly where they were going. 2 hours later, the mystery deepened considerably. The Defense Council had assembled in the underground command center beneath the capital city, where representatives from every major settlement and mining operation were connected through holographic links. The mood in the chamber was tense but controlled, as befitted the Zeltharian approach to crisis management. "The object has been identified," announced Chief Defense Analyst Orem Voss, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of strain. "It's a battleship. Specifically, it appears to be of human design and construction." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled officials. Councillor Yara Neth, representing the northern mining settlements, leaned forward in her chair. "Human, are you certain? We've had no contact with Earth's military forces. Why would they send a battleship to our system?" "That's what we're trying to determine," Commander Thalan replied from his position at the Orbital Control Center. "The vessel is now close enough for detailed scans, and we can confirm it's definitely of human origin. The hull configuration and energy signatures match known Earth fleet designs, though this particular ship doesn't appear in any of our identification databases." Dr. Selu Var, the colony's chief administrator, spoke up from his office in the capital. "Could this be related to Dr. Moonson's research? She's the only human currently on our planet." "We've attempted to contact Dr. Moonson at her research facility," Commander Thalan said, "but we're experiencing communication difficulties in that region. It may be related to the solar storm activity we've been tracking near the polar regions." What Commander Thalan didn't mention, because he didn't know it yet, was that the communication difficulties were not caused by solar storms. 3 hours earlier, when the human battleship had reached the edge of the Zelthara system, it had deployed a series of small, nearly invisible devices that were now disrupting specific communication channels while leaving others untouched. The humans knew exactly who they needed to talk to, and they wanted to control when and how those conversations would take place. As the Defense Council continued their discussions, the battleship steadily approached Zelthara Prime. When it finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel and appeared in the planet's orbital space, every sensor on the planet immediately focused on it. The ship was enormous, dark gray in color, with angular lines that spoke of both advanced engineering and serious military purpose. Along its hull, barely visible unless someone knew where to look, were the letters HMS Prometheus in standard Earth script. Commander Thalan watched in growing amazement as the battleship took up a position directly above the planet's northern hemisphere, specifically above the polar research region where Dr. Moonson was working. The ship's positioning was too precise to be coincidental. Whoever was commanding this vessel knew exactly where they wanted to be. "All stations, this is orbital control," Commander Thalan announced over the general communications system. "We have an unidentified human battleship in our orbital space. The vessel is not responding to communications and has taken up a position above the polar research facility. All surface installations should maintain standard operations, but be prepared for further instructions." On the surface of Zelthara Prime in the crystal cities and mining outposts, citizens looked up at their sky and saw nothing unusual. The human battleship was invisible to the naked eye, just another point of light among the stars. But those with access to sensor displays could see the massive vessel hovering silently above their world, like a sleeping giant. In the underground command center, the debate continued about how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Some council members argued for activating the planet's defensive systems, while others insisted that any show of force might be interpreted as hostile by the human ship. The Zeltharians had never faced a situation quite like this, and their peaceful nature made it difficult to decide on an appropriate response. "Perhaps we should try a different approach," suggested Councillor Neth. "Instead of trying to communicate with the ship directly, maybe we should focus on reaching Dr. Moonson. If this visit is related to her research, she might be able to provide some insight into what these humans want." Commander Thalan nodded, thoughtfully. "We'll continue trying to establish contact with the research facility. In the meantime, I recommend we maintain our current alert status but avoid any actions that could be interpreted as aggressive." What none of the Zeltharians knew was that aboard the HMS Prometheus, Captain Marcus Chen was listening to every word of their conversations. The human ship's advanced sensors could monitor most of their communication channels, and Captain Chen was carefully studying the aliens' reactions to his arrival. He had been ordered to retrieve Dr. Munson and investigate certain disturbing reports that had reached Earth through back-channel intelligence sources. The complete communications blackout his ship was maintaining was part of a deliberate psychological strategy designed to create uncertainty and prevent any attempts to hide evidence before he could investigate. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of his battleship, looking down at the peaceful world below through the main viewports. Zelthara Prime appeared serene and beautiful, with its blue oceans and white ice caps creating a stunning contrast against the golden light of its twin suns. It was hard to believe that such a tranquil-looking world might be harboring dark secrets. "Captain," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park, "we're receiving multiple hail attempts from the planetary authorities. They're using standard diplomatic channels and seem genuinely confused about our presence. Continue monitoring their communications," Captain Chen ordered, "but maintain radio silence for now. I want them to wonder about our intentions until we're ready to make contact on our terms." His executive officer, Commander David Torres, approached from the tactical station. "Sir, our sensors have located Dr. Munson's facility. It's heavily shielded and appears to be much larger than the Zeltharians indicated in their research permits. There are also several structures that don't match the approved construction plans." Captain Chen's expression hardened. The intelligence reports that had prompted this mission suggested that Dr. Munson's xenobiology research was being used as a cover for something much more sinister. If those reports were accurate, the peaceful Zeltharians might not be as innocent as they appeared. As the hours passed and the human battleship maintained its silent vigil above Zelthara Prime, tension continued to build on both sides. The Zeltharians grew increasingly anxious about the unresponsive vessel hovering over their world, while the humans aboard the Prometheus prepared for what might become a very difficult and dangerous mission. The silence was about to be broken, and when it was, nothing on Zelthara Prime would ever be the same again. The price of silence. The silence from the human battleship stretched into its 8th hour when everything changed. It began with a single transmission, broadcast on every communication frequency, simultaneously, cutting through all other signals with crystal clarity. The voice that emerged from speakers across Zelthara Prime was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Earth Fleet vessel, HMS Prometheus. We are here on official business regarding one of our citizens, Dr. Kira Munson. We require immediate access to her current location and all research facilities under her supervision. You have 1 hour to comply." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the Zeltharian leadership in stunned silence. "Commander." Thalan felt his skin shift to the deep silver of alarm as he processed the implications of the human captain's words. The tone had been polite, but carried an unmistakable undercurrent of authority that suggested this was not a request but a demand. In the underground command center, the Defense Council erupted into urgent discussions. Dr. Seluvar, his usually steady voice now shaking slightly, called for immediate order. "We need to understand what this is about before we make any decisions. Dr. Munson has been conducting legitimate research under proper authorization. There's no reason for Earth Fleet to make such demands." Counselor Yara Neath leaned forward, her expression troubled. "Unless there's something about her research we don't know." The captain mentioned all research facilities under her supervision. "I was under the impression she was working alone at a single location." Commander Thalan accessed the planetary database and pulled up Dr. Munson's research permits and facility specifications. What he found made his skin turn an even deeper shade of silver. According to our records, Dr. Munson was authorized to construct a small research laboratory for studying crystalline life forms. But our sensors are showing a complex that's at least 10 times larger than what was approved. The implications of this discovery sent ripples of concern through the assembled officials. If Dr. Munson had been conducting unauthorized research, it could explain the arrival of an Earth Fleet battleship, but it also raised disturbing questions about what the Zeltharian authorities had been allowing to happen on their world without proper oversight. Chief Defense Analyst Orem Voss accessed his tactical displays and studied the readings from the Polar Research Facility. The energy signatures from the complex are unusual. There are power levels consistent with advanced laboratory equipment, but also some readings I can't identify. And there are underground sections that extend much deeper than any crystalline life form studies would require. Dr. Var made the decision that would change everything. We need to contact Dr. Moonson immediately and get answers. If there's been some kind of misunderstanding, we can resolve it diplomatically. But we can't afford to ignore a direct demand from an Earth fleet battleship. What none of the Zeltharians knew was that at that very moment, Dr. Kira Moonson was sitting in a sterile white room deep beneath the polar ice, staring at a communication device that had been silent for 6 months. She was a woman in her early 40s, with the kind of weathered features that came from years of field research in harsh environments. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and her eyes held a mixture of intelligence and deep, gnawing guilt. The communication device suddenly activated, displaying the face of Commander Thalon. "Dr. Moonson, we need to speak with you immediately. There's an Earth fleet battleship in our orbital space, and they're demanding access to your research facility." Dr. Moonson closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had been dreading this moment for months, knowing that eventually someone would come looking for the missing humans. When she opened her eyes again, her voice was steady, but heavy with resignation. "Commander, I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear. The research I've been conducting here, it's not what we told your government." The color drained from Commander Thalon's face as Dr. Moonson continued. 6 months ago, I was contacted by a group of Zeltharian scientists who had discovered something they claimed could revolutionize medicine throughout the galaxy. They had found a way to use human neural tissue to enhance the crystalline life forms, creating a hybrid organism that could potentially cure diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries. Human neural tissue? Commander Thalon's voice was barely a whisper. They had obtained samples from human explorers who had gone missing in this sector over the past 2 years. 17 individuals who were reported as lost to space accidents or equipment failures. They weren't lost. "Commander, they were captured and brought here." The full horror of what Dr. Moonson was revealing began to sink in. Commander Thalon felt his world tilting as he realized that his peaceful, harmonious planet had been the site of experiments on sentient beings. Are these humans still alive?" Dr. Moonson nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. 12 of them are still alive, though their condition is compromised. The experiments required keeping their brains active while extracting neural tissue for the hybrid organisms. I was brought in because of my expertise in xenobiology. But when I realized what was really happening, I tried to stop the project. Tried to stop it? The lead researcher, Dr. Jorik Thess, convinced the facility administrators that the potential benefits outweighed the ethical concerns. He argued that 17 human lives were a small price to pay for medical advances that could save millions across multiple species. When I objected, they confined me to the facility and continued the work. Commander Thalon sat down heavily, his mind reeling from the implications. Not only had members of his own species been conducting horrific experiments on sentient beings, but they had been doing it under the cover of legitimate scientific research. The Earth fleet battleship above their planet wasn't making unreasonable demands, it was conducting a rescue mission. "Dr. Moonson," he said finally, "where exactly are these humans being held?" "In the deep levels of the complex, about 2 kilometers below the surface. The facility has its own security force, and they've been told that the humans are dangerous criminals who volunteered for the experiments in exchange for reduced sentences." Most of the staff believes that story. Commander Thalon immediately contacted the Defense Council and relayed Dr. Moonson's revelations. The reaction was swift and decisive. Dr. Var's voice shook with anger and shame as he addressed the emergency session. "This is an abomination. If what Dr. Moonson says is true, we have allowed our people to commit acts that violate every principle our society was built upon." Counselor Neth's skin had turned the dark blue-black of deep shame. "We need to contact the human captain immediately and offer our full cooperation. This cannot be allowed to continue for even one more day." But before they could act on their decision, the situation escalated dramatically. Captain Chen, who had been monitoring their communications and was now fully aware of the conversation with Dr. Munson, made his own decision. The time for waiting was over. High above Zelthara Prime, the HMS Prometheus came alive with activity. The battleship's powerful engines engaged, and the massive vessel began its descent toward the planet's surface. As it broke through the upper atmosphere, its hull began to glow with the heat of atmospheric entry, creating a brilliant streak of light that was visible from every settlement on the planet. Captain Chen stood on his bridge, watching the ice-covered landscape of the polar region grow larger on his viewscreens. His jaw was set with grim determination as he addressed his crew. "All hands, prepare for combat operations. We're going in to retrieve our people, and we will not be leaving without them." The battleship's descent created shock waves that shattered the peaceful quiet of the polar region. As it approached the research facility, massive cargo bay doors opened, and a fleet of military shuttles poured out like angry wasps from a disturbed hive. Each shuttle carried a team of elite Marines equipped with advanced combat gear and medical equipment designed for hostage rescue operations. Dr. Munson watched from her confinement as the human forces landed around the facility. Through the reinforced windows of her room, she could see armed figures in Earth Fleet uniforms moving with precision and purpose toward the main entrances. The facility's security forces, equipped only for dealing with minor disturbances, were completely overwhelmed by the professional military operation unfolding around them. The confrontation in the facility's main laboratory was swift and decisive. Dr. Jorik Thess, the lead researcher who had convinced his colleagues that human experimentation was justified, found himself facing Captain Chen in person. The human officer was tall and powerfully built, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to look straight through the Zeltharian scientist. "Where are my people?" Captain Chen asked, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of barely controlled fury. Dr. Thess, his skin now the pale white of fear, tried to maintain his composure. "Captain, you must understand, we were conducting vital research that could benefit countless species. The subjects volunteered for—" Captain Chen cut him off with a gesture. "Doctor, I've already heard the recordings of how you obtained your volunteers. Kidnapping and imprisonment are not forms of volunteering in human law. Now I'll ask you one more time. Where are my people?" Faced with the reality of an Earth Fleet captain who clearly knew the truth about the experiments, Dr. Thess led the rescue team to the deep levels of the facility. What they found there would haunt Captain Chen for the rest of his life. The 12 surviving humans were kept in a state of semi-consciousness, connected to machines that monitored their brain activity while extracting neural tissue for the hybrid organisms. The human medical team worked with desperate efficiency to stabilize the victims and prepare them for transport. Some had been in captivity for over 18 months and their physical condition was poor. But they were alive, and that was what mattered most. As the rescue operation continued, Captain Chen made a decision that demonstrated the moral strength that defined humanity at its best. Despite his anger at what had been done to his people, he ordered his medical team to also treat the Zeltharian researchers who had been injured during the facility's security system malfunction. When Dr. Thess expressed surprise at this gesture, Captain Chen's response became part of Earth Fleet legend. "Doctor," he said, "the difference between us is not that humans are incapable of terrible acts. The difference is that we choose not to commit them, even when we have every reason to seek revenge." The rescue operation was completed within 6 hours of the Prometheus's arrival. All 12 surviving humans were evacuated to the battleship's medical bay, where Earth Fleet doctors began the long process of healing both their physical and psychological wounds. The 5 humans who had died during the experiments were also recovered, so they could be returned to their families for proper burial. Before departing, Captain Chen met with the Zeltharian leadership in the capital city. The meeting was tense but respectful, as both sides recognized the gravity of what had occurred. Dr. Var, speaking for the Zeltharian government, offered formal apologies and promised that all those responsible for the experiments would face justice under Zeltharian law. Captain Chen's response was measured but firm. "Dr. Var, we appreciate your cooperation and your commitment to justice. However, Earth Fleet will be monitoring this situation closely. We will not tolerate any attempts to cover up what happened here or to avoid full accountability for these crimes." He paused, looking out at the peaceful city beyond the council chamber windows. "Your people have a reputation for wisdom and peaceful coexistence. Don't let the actions of a few scientists destroy that reputation, but understand that humanity remembers its friends and its enemies with equal clarity." As the HMS Prometheus prepared to depart Zelthara Prime, Dr. Kira Munson made her own choice. Despite being offered safe passage back to Earth, she requested permission to remain on the planet to help with the investigation and to ensure that the hybrid organisms created from human neural tissue were properly disposed of. Her decision to stay and face the consequences of her involvement, even though she had tried to stop the experiments, earned her the respect of both species. The battleship's departure was as silent as its arrival had been, but the impact of its visit would be felt for generations. The Zeltharian government implemented sweeping reforms to prevent any future abuse of research programs, and Dr. Jorik Thess and his collaborators faced trial for crimes against sentient beings. Most importantly, the 12 rescued humans eventually recovered from their ordeal and returned to productive lives, though they would always carry the scars of their experience. Their rescue became a symbol of humanity's commitment to protecting its own, no matter how far from Earth they might be, or how powerful their captors might seem. The story of the HMS Prometheus and its silent arrival at Zelthara Prime spread throughout the galaxy, serving as both a warning and a promise. A warning to those who might consider humans easy prey, and a promise to every human explorer that Earth fleet would never abandon them, no matter the cost or distance involved. In the end, the silence that had seemed so threatening when the battleship first arrived had become the foundation for a new understanding between species. Sometimes the most powerful message is delivered not through words, but through actions that speak louder than any speech ever could. The humans had shown that they were capable of tremendous mercy, even in the face of unforgivable crimes. But they had also demonstrated that their patience, while vast, was not infinite. And throughout the galaxy, other species took note of both lessons, understanding that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or their technology, but in their unwavering commitment to the principles they held dear. The shadow of the human battleship had passed, but its message would endure forever.